Greg,
Kareem,
welcome to the pre-show.
welcome to the pre-show.
We are going to get to our guest, Dr. Jason Wilson. But before we get to Mr. Wilson, let's
Dr.
do
Wilson.
some Dr. Wilson. We'll have to ask him whether he wants to go by doctor.
That's his social handle.
That's true. All right, Dr. Greg, what does the Eminem song Stan, the K-pop group BTS, and former guest and DJ Paul Chin have in common?
Well, yesterday I would have said I have no idea.
Okay.
But you, after multiple times of me not understanding, explained it to me. So why don't you explain it to our listeners?
So the Eminem song Stan
Yes.
is a song about a fan, a fanatic fan. You know, someone who is totally into Eminem, totally into the subject of that song. Right. And so as a result of the popularity of that song, the word and term "stan" has now become part of the vernacular, as the kids like to call it. And
the kids call it vernacular. Okay, go ahead.
So if Greg, you're wearing a Mercedes McLaren
yes
cap, so you could be called a Mercedes
Lewis
McLaren
Hamilton Stan.
Yeah.
Or Lewis Hamilton Stan, because this is a signature Lewis Hamilton hat.
He has signed it.
No, he hasn't signed it, but it's he designed it.
He designed it. He designed it.
Yes.
Yes. The BTS Army, as they're known, as the kids like to call them, are fans or stans.
See, that I get you. That vernacular is not something a kid uses, but BTS Army being there. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Carry on.
Yeah. And so what happened was, our previous guest of the podcast, Paul Chin, read an article. And in this article, let me pull it up again. In this article, the author was ragging on
BTS's fan base.
Yeah, the BTS
conspiring
Army.
To drive sales. I know more about this than you think sales. I do.
Yeah,
I get it.
And so,
I'm cool.
Yeah, and so Paul took offense to that article, saying, "Wait a second, aren't the charts made up of the results of what fans of these musicians do? Right?
Yes.
Don't they listen, stream, download, and buy all their music, or the music of whoever it is that they like?" And that's pop music, isn't it? Pop is popular music. It's not DJs anymore at radio stations deciding who gets played or not get played. It's fans who are, for the most part.
For the most part, there is still the influence of the programmer at a station that can make an impact. But yeah, for the most part, now it's kids discovering music through digital distribution. Yeah. And
sharing it, whether it's on TikTok or Snapchat or what their parents use, Facebook and Instagram. And so as a result of Paul telling this author off who wrote this article, and coming to the defense of the BTS Army. The BTS Army proceeds to support Paul Chin by listening to his music, by purchasing his music, by purchasing his swag and stuff off of his Bandcamp and his website. So it has now turned into it's just amazing and such a happy story to come across. A do-it-yourself DJ and musician like Paul Chin, who has kept busy during the pandemic, is now in the good graces of one of the most influential groups of music fans out there, the BTS Army.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to sort of give props to my brother, Anis, who made me aware of this story. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, where he shared a tweet from Paul Chin saying, "Hey, check this out. The BTS fans are purchasing his music and supporting him." And I thought it was interesting. I didn't fully understand why or how until I saw another, I think an Instagram post or a tweet from Paul Chin explaining what happened. And I thought, this is phenomenal. This is really, really interesting and such a good story to find out about and to tell everybody about.
What I'd be interested to know is how much it moved the needle for him. I'd love to have a conversation with him about that at some point. It's like, they can drive millions and millions and millions of listens overnight.
Absolutely.
I'd be keen to know what it did for him. And again, let's have him back on the show at some point to talk about that.
Yeah,
it'd be very interesting.
For sure. He does talk about both in the article as well as in comments he's made on social, that there was a massive vertical spike on his Spotify music. It just went through the roof.
Yeah, but I get that. But for us, if we went to 36 listeners, that would be a massive spike.
Yes, and it's gone again. Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, and maybe we'll get him back and ask him specifics. Whether he'll show those specifics, it's up to him to do. So I do know. I think someone correct me if I'm wrong, but he went from just hoping to make some money back from the money you outlay in terms of putting together an album. Or a project to paying that off and starting to make some great money, all as a result of saying, "Hey, this is pop music. This is how things work. It's no, you can't bash fans for buying and supporting the artists that they love."
Yeah,
that's just how it works.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the pre-show. On to our guest, Dr. Jason Wilson.
Hi, the following podcast is brought to you by Radical Road Brewery, the best craft beer in the heart of Leslieville. Find them at 1177 Queen Street East. That's Radical Road Brewery.
Hello, my name's Jason Wilson. I am a two-time Juno nominee, a Canadian Reggae Music Award winner, best-selling author, and general international man of mystery. Welcome to the music.
Welcome. It's great to have you here with us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah.
So before we get started,
good. There you go.
Let me start, Greg. Before we get started, should we be calling you Dr. Jason Wilson? Is that?
That's reserved for my students and people that I'm not very fond of. So you guys can call me Jason.
We call you Jason.
Oh, very
awesome. Well, listen, the first question I have, Greg is a lifelong suffering fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Mm-hmm.
And you have authored a very important book about the Leafs. I know this is a music podcast, but we need to get this out of the way.
That's
first,
okay.
I think. I think you wrote the centennial book about the Leafs. My question to you is, Jason.
Yes.
Is there a curse on this? Like, is there any hope at all? Should Greg just look for another team to support?
Well, it's an interesting day because my other big team is very, very Scottish, as you probably read about. So Team Scotland lost to Czech Republic yesterday 2-0, and the first time we've been in the big tournament since I met my wife 23 years ago. So I was crying over that, crying over the Leafs, and it's painful that writing the book, I realized that the first 50 years were amazing. 11 cups are you kidding? And since then, my lifetime, bupkis. So it's been a painful journey for us. And Greg, I'm interested to know if you feel there's something, and I'm actually not even really joking, that there's something actually deeply psychologically, that affects us in a way that we sort of anticipate anguish. If something good happens in our life, we're like, well, the other shoe is going to fall. We see it every time we watch the blue and white.
Greg, before you answer, I'm just going to leave. I'll come back in half an hour.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. I actually, it's funny because I may be the curse. I may be the curse.
See, I feel that way too. So
the last time they won, I know at one point during the playoffs, Dad was called from his buds to go to the hospital because Mom was giving birth.
Oh,
so I was only a couple months old.
Wow.
When they won the last time. And it was interesting because my kids are born in the early 90s. So my daughter was, we were pregnant, my ex-wife and I were pregnant with our daughter. And I thought, okay, this is it. It's next generation. Well, that didn't happen. So then the following year, it's like, okay, now, a year and a bit, we're pregnant with my son. And so I'm thinking, okay,
here we go.
Male Tilston. I got goosebumps. This is the way it's supposed to be. Didn't happen. So I jumped, I was on the bandwagon then. We lived through the Ballard years. I was on the bandwagon then. Jumped back on, about 8 years ago, whatever it was. Jumped back off. And my son for the last couple of years, and he's in his mid-20s now. Mid-20s. For the last couple of years, he's been saying to me, Dad, I swear to you, I promise you, this is the team. And I'm like, Bri, I'm just a bitter old Leaf fan. I don't want to hear it. Finally, this year, I buy Sportsnet. We're up at the cottage in the Manitoulin right now, hiding out during everything.
Nice.
I grab Sportsnet heading into the end of the season. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm in. And so I think that's me. I think it's me.
I knew well, my wife hates that I'm usually right because I knew after game 5, there's no coming back after that. And my mom and I talk after the game every game, and she's so glass half full all the time. She's such an optimist, and she says, "Oh, but we played well. Do you think we played very well?" And I'm like, "Yeah, not really, Mom." And honestly, we let them off the mat. And we've got 2 more chances, no problem. I'm like, you've been watching the same team I have for a long time, Mom, haven't you? So
yeah,
it's rough.
Yeah, it's weird.
There's worse things in the world. There's a million worse things in the world, and I remind myself of that. But it's hard. It's hard being a Leafs fan, that's for sure.
you wrote that book. You wrote. I'm going to bring it back into music here. So you wrote that book. You wrote the Lord Stanley and the Cup book about Lord Stanley history.
Co-wrote with Kevin Shea. I have to mention that.
Yeah, my apologies. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep. You have a PhD, a doctorate in history from Guelph, which is actually funny because just yesterday, my wife and I were walking. We do our nightly walk, and we realized my cousin who's coming up this week, her son goes to Guelph.
Nice.
Just started at Guelph, and his name's Griffin. And it dawned on us for the first time, oh my God, Griffin's a Griffin. Anyway, that aside, we've had Jay Douglas as a guest on this show, and a number of other people to speak. What I'd love to hear from you as the historian is the impact of Toronto on reggae in the 70s and reggae on Toronto in the 70s. Can you give us do you mind going back and talking a bit about that as a historian?
No, not at all. I mean, it's huge. And I think Toronto's very, very unique in the world, really. Arguments could be made about London and Birmingham in England, I suppose, but you really had a group of people that came to Toronto to settle, which is not terribly unusual unto itself, I suppose. But the impact that their music had on not just a nascent domestic reggae scene, but on music, period. There's no Drake without reggae in Toronto in the 70s and 80s, right? He would say that too. And I think it's astounding. I quizzed my students. I asked them who their favorite Canadian Bhangra artist is, or if they've heard of Lucio Battisti. And of course, there's absolute eyes roll. They have no idea what I'm talking about. I said, right. You know who Bob Marley is, right? And every one of them knows who Bob Marley is. And there is a reggae Juno category. There's no Bhangra category, and yet there's way more South Asians in Canada than there are Jamaicans. There's no Italian, contemporary Italian category at the Junos, and yet there's a reggae category. That's astounding for an island that's so small in the Caribbean. That shows you how important and impactful that music is. But to get to your other point, Toronto definitely affects it the other way. I don't think reggae is or should be that's made in Canada should be quote unquote Jamaican reggae. It isn't. It's Canadian reggae. It's a different thing. Just as UB40 and Aswad and Steel Pulse in England have their own sound that's distinctly British. So yes, Toronto affected the way reggae was played, recorded, and of course the admixtures of the different kinds of things that were happening, particularly in the early 80s along Queen Street. There's, it's a back and forth thing that's ping-ponging. It's still ping-ponging as we speak. And it was nice for me. I was born in 70, so I really don't hit the scene till the mid 80s. But I witnessed it. I was there, and I've been very fortunate to play with all of the big names, and certainly in Canadian reggae and a lot of Jamaican and British ones too. So it's unique, and it was a beautiful time. It was a beautiful time. It was multiculturalism in the very best sense, in that it wasn't prescribed. It wasn't some governmental brochure that was saying, we all have to hold hands and sing Kumbaya or whatever. No, this was, I talk about this in the book, is that it's a collision. It's a collision at first. The best example I have is from my own hood. When I was about 4 or 5, the Jamaican migrants were coming into our neighborhood, and the older kids, they were at each other's throat. Like, there was heavy street fights. In fact, I remember one amazing street fight, went up and down. The parents were involved. It was fantastic. And I wanted to go and watch, and my mom says, "Come back here, you," right? So I always talk about these 2 kids. I won't mention their names, but they were both arrested, and it was bad news. Their younger brothers, who were my age, became best friends. So I show that as an example of, like, let's not kid ourselves. Human experience is difficult. Collisions with cultures is difficult. It takes time to work through some of that stuff. But on the other side of that, you have an authentic coming together of peoples and a deeper understanding of each other. And I think that's what's missing sometimes, is that there's this fear of not wanting to explore each other. Everyone's staying in their lane. And I think that's really missing the point. I think that's, in a way, racism in the name of anti-racism, if that makes any sense to you. I think those explosions, those collisions is what brings people closer together.
Really interesting to say that. That's sort of what these are the sorts of conversations we've been having, especially over the past couple of years, where,
of course,
we talk about how do we as different communities get along with each other and stop hating each other. And one of the things that early on that I always believed in is that if you live in a place where there's different types of people, you've got no choice, but you're bumping into people from different places. And
100%.
How can you hate the people you are with all the time, right? You're just with them. You go to school with them. You work with them. You play in the local leagues with them. You work with them. And so it's like they become, you become someone who is exposed to people, cultures from all over the place.
And I think that's an excellent point. And I think it took me time, once I started touring a bit and seeing different parts of the world and even different parts of the country and stuff, that I realized, wait a minute, North York is kind of unique. Those same sort of sensibilities in the playground, girlfriend, boyfriend, smoking weed together for the first time, listening to the same music, going to the same school, the dances, et cetera, et cetera. That didn't happen everywhere. And I didn't realize that. And I was probably blind to some of the overt and obvious racism that was extant and still is around the world, just because it was a bit of a haven where I came from, a bit of a multicultural. We all were immigrants in my hood. We were all immigrants. I happened to be Scottish, but mom and dad came in 1966. So we all had funny accents. And it's one of those things that over time, I look back and there's, some people call Keel and Finch, Jane and Finch area what's the term that's been used? Yes, that they did a documentary on me, and it was the gritty, drug-infested neighborhoods of whatever. My mom and dad were watching it, and they were going, "What? What are they talking about?" I was like, "Well, kind of, Mom. Kind of." But I wouldn't change it for the world because of the perspective of other that it gave me. But I now realize how precious that is, and how maybe rare it is if we just look around and have seen what's happened in the last few years. It's shocking. Yeah.
I'm going to take the perspective of one of your students, Jason.
Okay.
You talked earlier about you don't get to drink without understanding or understanding the beginning of the Canadian reggae scene, something along those effects you mentioned earlier. If I'm your student, I would put up my hand and go, yeah, whatever. How do you get from one spot to another? Could you explain that quickly for us?
You just cut out at the very last part when you were asking the question for me, and I could.
Yeah, no worries. Could you explain how do you get to drink from Canadian
how do you
reggae?
get to Drake? Right. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, Drake grew up very much the same kind of environment that I did, a little later on, of course. But that whole... There's an authenticity to Drake, and I've seen it when he's, self-deprecating on Saturday Night Live or something like that. And he has the cool Drake thing. He's being Drake and acting that Drakeness, right? But every once in a while, the Toronto boy pops out, and I'm like, yeah, I know you. And I think in a way, what it is that Jamaican music penetrated the scene to such an extent, particularly in the 80s, particularly on Queen Street, and I know we're probably going to talk about that later, to such an extent that non-reggae bands were using elements of it. Even if they weren't even considering themselves a reggae band or even playing a reggae song, and as far as they were concerned. And I talk about that with my students, and this might not translate with the microphone as is, but when I walked up and down Keel Street when I was, say, 15, 17, you would hear a car passing by, and you would hear, right? And you'd know that's someone's, and it could have been any color person in the car, but you knew they were listening to reggae, right? That subspectrum, that really low black bass, that's so low, right? That whales can understand what's going on. That moved into all kinds of genres, including like country and western, to the extent that you walk into a coffee shop today and you hear that low sub dark bass, and yet it's a Taylor Swift song, for instance, right? And that's what reggae music did internationally. It sort of penetrated the sonic spectrum of all music because it's so infectious to have that bass that just moves your heart and your stomach, whether you want it or not. And if anyone that's ever been to like a proper reggae dance will know what I'm talking about. It's that sort of, it actually makes you a little kind of wobbly, and that's before you've smoked one spliff or had one red stripe. The actual sonic movement, the air that's coming from those sub bass speakers are actually moving you. And I feel like that is something that the other genres picked up on. And all that, back to your initial question, is that Drake grew up with all of that. Drake grew up with all of that sort of dabbling and that sharing of and the bridging. And Clive Walker, who's an excellent historian on reggae in Canada, would say that the guys that came after me are they're sipping from the same water fountains and everything, but they're expressing themselves in a different way. So Drake is more in the hip hop R&B kind of expression, but it's still linked. It's still linked to that Toronto expression of an earlier age, which is obviously clearly what affected me and my musical trajectory and such.
So let's go back to talk about how you got into music. What inspired you? Like before you're 14 years old and playing with Messenger, which just blows my mind, and we want to talk about that at some point. But like, what influenced you to become a musician?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult question, Greg. I think there's no time in my life where, I mean, my mom's got a picture of me. We were on holiday in Acapulco when I was 2, and I'm with a guitar. My best friend, who we're still best friends, he's about 8 years older. They used to bring me over just to entertain, if they had people over, just to, Jason, sing a song for us. And I would get up and do it, like bang, Elton John tune or whatever. My sister's into Elton John and Rod Stewart, so I kind of got a bit of that. Dad would play all the Scottish stuff, so I had all the Scottish stuff in my head. But then by the time, I guess I was 10 years old was really when I started to say, what is this music you're listening to all my other friends? And it's reggae. So I remember in Dave Gray's basement when I was 10 or 11 years old and listening to Dennis Brown and Gregory Isaacs and saying, this is wicked. This is awesome. And then, so Dave's older brothers would have like blues dances on the weekends. And of course, kids like us were never allowed anywhere near it. But what we were able to do sometimes is sneak in to the top of the stair and listen to what was going on downstairs and just wishing we were down there with all the pretty girls, etc. So that happened really early. So it wasn't a conscious thing that I woke up, in my mid-20s and said, hey, I'm going to try reggae. Reggae was always around me, or at least always around me since in my formative years from about 10 on. And even my white friends, my best friend, Brian Robertson, my next door neighbor, he was a reggae nut, he was older. So he was able to, go buy records and bring home and say, hey, this is an English reggae band called Aswad. And then, of course, he brought home a record by this new band that was come out, and they were the SHIT. They were the guys that you had to listen to, and it's a multiracial band from Birmingham, and they're called UB40. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then that summer, my aunt says, you can, your cousin, Michael, is in UB40. So that was a game changer. So the next year I met them, and the rest is history. I mean, they had a profound effect on my career, and I, probably saw them 100 times and toured with them and recorded with some of them. And, it's a long-standing love affair between me and the UB guys.
But it's interesting because as much as, Wikipedia says you're a reggae artist, and so many articles, there's so much to your music, and I'm sure that you talk about your dad with the Scottish and other influences, you mix so many genres together, whether it's inside of one song or the album Sumac Roots, there's so many different sounds in there. Is that just your lifestyle and even in your storytelling? I know I'm going in 1,000 different directions here. No. I appreciate it. I always say it comes back to reggae. I learned reggae first. Truly. I truly did. I think I learned a couple of Christmas carols like Silent Night and Blue Spanish Eyes I learned on the organ, and I upstaged my mom. That's another story, but my mom had learned Blue Spanish Eyes for all the neighbors, and it was going to be her big moment, and then I jumped up and actually played it before she did, so she's never let me live that down. I was, I know, it was awful. I was 8, so I that's my only excuse. No, I think reggae's the base. It always comes back to reggae in terms of the sensibilities and stuff, but man, the best reggae musicians I've ever played with, including Sly and Robbie, Ernest Ranglin, Jackie Mittoo, these guys love all kinds of music, and I feel we get very precious about our genres, whatever they may be, and want to stick in that lane. And man, that's dull. I mean, for me as an artist to express myself, if I want to do a jazz waltz in the middle of a reggae set, that's what I want to do, right? I get that people hate these words, authentic and tradition, but I get the people that want that and want to, they want to turn on Spotify, a reggae playlist. I'm probably not going to be on that reggae playlist because I'm too unpredictable. 3 out of 4 times you're going to get that reggae song, and then you're not. So I kind of get that, but at the same time, it's a wonderful, big, beautiful world with lots of incredible music that none of us will live long enough to hear. So that's where I'm at with that. And having musicians, great musicians that I'm so blessed to have to work with that can play it. Like a Marcus Ali on saxophone. He's my sax guy. But then we started touring with Dave Swarbrick, the fiddle player from Fairport Convention, and he learned all these jigs and reels on tin whistle, and now he's playing jazz bebop scales on tin whistle, and anyone that plays tin whistle and sees Marcus play it ends up, how is he doing that? So I'm very blessed to have guys like Marcus in my ether to be able to experiment, and they love when I go out. They really do. That don't stick to the. I always come back. I start there and I come back, and reggae peaks out throughout the whole show, but I like to go out different places. So that's on the musical side. I mean, I want to explore the storytelling. I mean, I don't know if it's because you love history and as a historian, but like again, that album Sumac Roots and the story of Toronto and everything, Great Fire, and the stories are behind it. I mean, storytelling is so much a part of what you do.
Yeah,
so I
absolutely.
Just wanted to sort of explore that with you.
Yeah, I feel it's kind of, it can be burdensome sometimes to always be conscious of trying to write something historical for every song. But man, when you hit and you feel like, okay, I'm distilling this story, and then you distill that story and have someone that was involved and even tangentially with that story tell you that they're weeping because I never thought you would tell that story about my family or my culture or whatever. That's what makes it all worthwhile, right? If someone listens to my tunes and goes, I love that tune, great melody, cool, whatever, awesome sax solo, blah, 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 I'm good with that. That's totally fine. But if someone listens to it and says, is he actually talking about Elizabeth Simcoe, like Governor Simcoe's wife, that like, what? And Joseph Brandt? What? Right? Like, I love those moments, especially, when someone gets it. It makes it all those hours really, really. Although let me digress for a second, because my most popular song of all time, and I've made more money with this tune than anything else, was a song I wrote on the Keel Street bus. It's called Keel Street. It's been used in a couple of documentaries. It's been used in a film. It's been used on the show "The Kink in My Hair." They used it. I wrote that in 10 minutes in the Keel Street bus. And it's made me more money than pretty much my whole catalog combined. And now, like, songs take me 4 months to write, right? Like, it takes me that long to research, and but I do love the process. I think you have to love the process, or you got to change your process. That would be my recommendation.
Do you, when you write a song, we've been talking about sumac roots. Are you the type of artist that lets the listener sort of take ownership of that song and figure out what it means to them? Or when you write a song, is there a story and a message and you want that to stick?
I would say I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice in that. I think it will always be to the listener. Our most recent song, which has just made the top 10 reggae charts in Canada. Thank you very much.
Congrats.
Thank you. Karl Harvey, who is Toots in the band, was Toots in the Maytals band leader. Unfortunately, we lost Toots during COVID. Him and I did this track, and it's called Ready to Be Loved. And people are hearing this song and enjoying it and thinking it's sort of a love story in a way, or someone that feels that they need loved. But the actual truth of the matter is it's about a human fragment that was found in the Siberian mountains that is a hybrid of Neanderthal and the Denisovan humans, pre-human humans, sapiens, I should say, that this 15-year-old girl, they figure, and they've nicknamed her Denny, and it's really a song about her being discovered and what was her life like. I'm choosing that to make it a love story in a way that she united two tribes, two peoples together, and that she was, a queen of the in-betweens and the and that kind of. But Karl, for instance, the guy that I actually produced the song with, said, "That's what the song's about." after he'd heard it like for 1,000 times by this point. But it's been brilliant. It's been featured in a few places, and the coolest part, this is my favorite part, is that the team that discovered Denny love it. They reached out to me. Yeah, they reached out to me, and they're like, "Thank you for appreciating what we do." And it was Dr. Svante Pabo, And I was like, oh, you're welcome, Dr. Pabo. And then I read up on this guy. He was like Time Magazine's most 100 influential people and like one of the scientists of the year. And like, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I should have given him a little more props than, oh, you're most welcome. Yeah, you enjoy that song.
It's interesting that that you spoke about that song after my question, because that was exactly the song that I had in mind. Because when I heard the song, I actually watched the video as well.
The animation.
Great animated short by that.
Thank
great
you.
Animated short.
They did wonderful work. They did.
And I'm watching it with all of the input that we've had in Canada over the past week and a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to that song and I go, is this about finding the children?
It's crazy that those parallels exist in art. And I think that's happened to me a couple of times where I've written something and not really fully known what it was about. And it kind of gets, and I'm not trying to get too esoteric or airy-fairy with you guys, but there's moments where it's like things are revealed to you after. And it gives me goosebumps what you're saying there, because I feel at the very least it wasn't about Neanderthals or Denisovans, because they don't exist as such anymore, although they're in our genes. It's about us, finding each other, finding ourselves, finding where we meet. The thing that pains me the most is the us and theming of it. And the whole, this is my story. Don't you dare look at my story. And this is, stay back. That interests me so little. What really interests me is where we meet. Where do we meet? And Queen Street back in the 70s and the 80s, which, back to your original questions, was a great place for that. This was a place where everyone met and figured out stuff. So hopefully, hopefully there's more of that. There's more of discovery, and we know there are far more children than 215. I mean, the number's already up from there, and hopefully we find them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Queen Street. And so the years, Greg has talked about Queen Street. He grew up playing in a number of venues with his various incarnations of his band. You obviously have played on Queen Street. We have a segment called Lost Venues, Jason, that we'd like to explore right now. And whether this place is on Queen Street or somewhere else, but we're curious about a venue that you have really, really fond memories of, that just as a matter of musical evolution and condo taxes does not exist anymore as a music venue. I'm curious if you have a place in mind.
Oh, there sure is. And I think anyone that was
I know where you're going,
remotely involved in the reggae scene, or in even the world, quote unquote, world music scene, there is no golden age. I came up with this idea, golden age of Canadian reggae, without the Bamboo Club. And Richard O'Brien and Paddy Habib and company that really gave reggae a home, but not a home that was specific to one particular kind of reggae or one kind of community or whatever. Like a real high-end frontline venue where it was living, breathing. Again, back to not a governmental brochure of, but real interculturalism is the best term, where you literally have all kinds of races and classes and genders, even back in that day, coming together in this one place. And the anthem for that was reggae. It was reggae music that was, whether it was Leroy Sibbles giving you the old school Jamaican thing, or Messenger, or the Satellites giving you the sort of the Canadian version of it. And Adrian Miller, who was in 20th Century Rebels, giving you sort of a punky reggae vibe to it, rock and roll vibe to it as well. And then later, Tabarook was my first band, and we had a CD a million years ago, it seems like now, with Alanis Morissette, and Alanis joined us at the Bamboo for a night, and that was, so without that, there's none of that happens, I don't think. I mean, maybe it does somewhere else, maybe it crops up, but not to that sort of uniformed extent where anyone, and I'm sure Greg can attest to this, if there was a reggae band that wasn't like Jimmy Cliff or UB40 or Marley or whatever, like, okay, they're going to play Massey Hall or whatever. But anyone less on the B level or the B plus level, I like to say, they're playing the Bamboo. That's where they're going to be. And if it's not them, you're going to get something local that's going to be equivalent to that every week. And sometimes 3 or 4 nights a week, you're going to have reggae. We all mourned it. Frankly, there's not a mecca for reggae music anymore in the city, which is unfortunate. There are great venues that have reggae music, but Bamboo was a special place and had its own sort of operating orbit within it. People actually stood in the same sort of places. I speak about this in the book, where young band, multicultural band like us starting out, we were young and green, and we were lucky to get, a Tuesday night or something at the Bamboo when we were starting out. And on to the left of me, so I'm facing the front over here, but to the left of me on this side was the wall of dreads that would just sort of lean up with their beer, and they'd be like watching. And if you knew, if you got approval from that part of the crowd, that everyone else would respond favorably to you. And thank God that happened for us. So, we kind of got the stamp of approval from the dread section over here. And of course, got to be friends with many of them afterwards and make music with them. Most of them were musicians anyway. So, but yeah. And that was one, but then you have like completely different things happening. You'd have, Bay Street Lawyer bringing a date and having Thai food and just wanting to dance.
Thai, best.
Yeah, it was. Thai. It was incredible food. So, and then, just, it was amazing the different kinds of things that were going on all in the same place, making different memories for sure, but with the same music as the anthem to those memories, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. We played there a few times. I think it was more private gigs because we were more sort of the rock funk. We came from the funk side with a little bit of the rock influence. Well, not a little bit, a lot of rock influence. And we played a few times there. And I just love the room. And it's not even, as much as I love playing on that stage, again, the pad Thai. And to your point, just people showing up. I remember being there with Paul Lau, who worked over at Steve's, was like one of the keyboard gurus over at Steve's.
Yeah, I remember.
And Paul he's now in Calgary. But anyway, and so Paul took my girlfriend at the time and myself over to the Bamboo for some pad Thai. And he's from Halifax originally. And he's like, oh, hey, Sarah, can you come over here and meet my friends, Greg and Erica? And it's Sarah McLaughlin. And we're just hanging out and we're just eating pad Thai. And it's just, again, it just the vibe and, the music 100%. Had the pleasure of playing, again, a little bit different music, but just to your point, anybody, the Bay Street Lawyer could just show up and there you are. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what made it special. And that's what actually opened up possibilities for reggae and not just reggae, but certainly reggae in the city where, said Bay Street Lawyers like, well, I love that band. Why don't we have that for our wedding? Because they played at the Bamboo, right? Those kinds of things. And that kind of thing happened all the time at the Bamboo where there was some sort of metaphysical connections happening between the clientele and the people on stage all the time.
Did you spend any time upstairs at the after parties from in behind, whatever the street is behind? You had to go up the stairs, and it was the big room.
I'm not at liberty to talk about that.
Oh, because I remember going up there one time, getting through all the levels of security.
Yeah.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, it was Jeff Healey and I think Rick Emmett jamming up on the stage together.
Yes, I know what you mean.
I
now.
got goosebumps. Yeah. Mind blowing. Like, again, all the bars are shut down. Where are we going to go? Upstairs, the Bamboo at the back again. Yeah, nice. It's coming up.
Rick Emmett, the poet. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But even upstairs afterwards. Oh, great. I mean, some fun nights up there.
Oh yeah. No, I grew up there, man. That's my education before I went back to school. So yeah. And again, unfortunately, we don't have that place anymore for reggae in the city. We have good places. Hopefully, after COVID, some of these places are going to come back. The Bamboo was a very, very special place indeed.
What do you think the future is going to be like? I know last year you did the Real Gig, Real Safe.
Yeah.
That we have up on the Manitoulin here, Maya's, and she had some bands come in, and it was very social distance. But
right.
What do you think? What do you think the near future, not the long term future?
I think the near future. So I've got a British tour. So check this out. I've got 9 shows in Britain, then another 3 shows in Scotland in January. I've got Bermuda and I've got the Cayman Islands. I do not have a single Canadian show yet. So I don't know what that means. I mean, I think there'll be some sort of 25-35% capacity type thing going on for a little while till people get comfortable. Are we going to have, here's my 2 vaccination
passport
thing on my phone or whatever? Like, I don't know. I don't know how people feel about that or how I feel about that, but clearly that thing is missing, that live music thing is missing. And what I know about people is that they need that. And my hope is that that it will come back sooner than later. Something's coming back soon. I think we're all feeling that. I think we're all feeling a little, okay, there's light at the end of this tunnel here. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we wish you the best on your on that tour, and if you need someone to carry your luggage down in the Cayman Islands, just be a shout.
yeah, they're pretty sweet gigs. So it sounds great, but I'd love a Toronto show. Would be nice.
Sure.
Something I could drive to. That would be good.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about Drake. Just call up Drake and see if we can get a place in history. I mean, we got our tickets to July Talk in December. We're crossing our fingers for that one. And
nice. Yeah, I'll text Drake after this.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, he gets back to me within the hour usually.
Jason, I believe you have a song ready to play for us.
I do.
Wondering if you can intro the song. Tell us the song and what's it about.
Yeah, so this is off our Perennials album from 2016. And it's a good Scottish word, rummel-gumption. And it basically means having, guts, but also smarts. And so together, which is kind of a note to my wife. She was working at the UN in New York for a couple of years, and it was great for her career, but it was hard on us. And this is really the song about me going to pick her up and bringing her home. And it was a good moment. So it just came out that way, and it's become a sort of a show ender for us because the crowd really, really digs it when we do have a crowd.
Yeah.
And we will have a crowd again someday. It's sort of a fan favorite. So I thought that would be a good one.
Awesome.
Nice.
This is Jason Wilson and Rummel Gumption.
I said now ring a ring a ring a ring a ring my little Liberty Bell. far as I can tell. You got conviction, you're so very certain. Sing it out and loud and I'll drive us home. When I'm down, you lift me up. When I'm up, you take me higher. When I'm down, you lift me up. When I'm up, you take me higher. And I know you got rum gumption in your heart. And I know you got rum gumption in your soul. I said now ring a ring a ring a ring a ring my little Liberty Bell. You're the fairest songbird far as I don't New York City look so pretty in the review mirror. Flying up the interstate, oh, when I'm down, you lift me up. When I'm up, you take me higher. When I'm down, you lift me up. When I'm up, you take me higher. And I know you got rum gumption in your heart. And I know you got rum gumption in your soul. All right, here we go. When I'm up, you take me higher. When I'm down, you lift me up. When I'm up, you take me higher. When I'm down, you lift me up. When I'm up, you take me higher. When I'm down, you lift me up. When I'm up, you take me higher. And I know you got rum gumption in your heart. And I know you got rum gumption in your soul. Ring a ring a ring a ring a ring my little Liberty Bell. You got rum gumption in your heart.
That's great.
Sweet.
Thank you. Thank you.
No worries.
So I have a last question I usually like to ask, but the first thing I do want to ask is, I remember being at the Toots show a few years back, and Toots was, not busting on Karl Harvey about being from Toronto, but, really pointing it out, really making sure that it was well known. What was it like to work with Karl? I got as a fanboy geeking out with goosebumps here. What was it like?
Well, I grew up with them. So I grew up with the Harveys. So I'll give you the Karl's the oldest and Toots and the Maytals, but not just Toots and the Maytals. I mean, he's done a whole bunch of different things. And then Ogigi, Rupert Ogigi, was the front man to Messenger, is the front man to Messenger to this day. And their youngest brother was my best friend, who unfortunately passed away when we were teenagers from a 2-year bout with cancer, Richard. And Richard and I started our first band, or my first band at least, when I was 12. And then, I think you alluded to earlier, Greg, I played my first nightclub with Messenger when I was 14. Cafe on the Park on Eglinton.
Wow.
And so what was it?
In
It was
on
a
the
bar,
park? Like in on the park?
Not in on the Park's the hotel. This was Cafe on the Park. It was Avenue. I want to say it was like Avenue Road in Eglinton area.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah, and it was a messenger tribute. So Errol, the usual bassist, was going to sing all the Bob Marley songs, which meant Saint, the bass player or the keyboard player, was going to play bass, which meant there was no keyboard player. So you can imagine 14-year-old Jay in junior high school getting the phone call from Ogigi saying, "Hey, Casper," they called me Casper. "Casper, you can play a show for me tonight." And I'm like, yeah, let me ask my mom, I guess. And the coolest thing was there's some crazy archaic law that allowed me to perform. Mm-hmm. That was totally fine. I was able to perform. I couldn't be in the club though. Mm-hmm. Figure that one out. So I could be on stage, but the second I finished on stage, I had to go sit up in a storage room upstairs.
Wow.
Outside, I couldn't be in the bar, but legally I could be on stage. So yeah, it was a bizarre, but incredible. You know, you can imagine my Monday morning with my friends back at Elia Junior High School. You know, how was your weekend? Right? Yeah. Awesome. So that was kind of cool. Anyway, long story short, Karl's been in my life for many years. He's incredible. He's just got great ears. He's got a great tone. And we've wanted to work more together, but with him being on the road with Toots so much, it was so hard. But now we obviously with COVID, but also with losing Toots, there's more opportunities to do that. And I'm taking him on to some of these places. He's going to Bermuda, and I think he's going to do the second UK tour with us. So it's nice to be working with him regularly.
Very nice. Very nice. So one of the questions that we'd like to ask as we wrap it up is, what is in your earbuds lately? What are you listening to that other people should be checking out?
Wow. I wish I could say there's some 21st century things. I'm listening to, there's a cool album that just came out recently. It's a Thelonious Monk live show at a school in California that was recorded by the janitor. And it's really cool story. Check it out. The name is Palo something. Sorry, I'm blanking on that. So that's what I listened to like yesterday. Is it wrong? I don't know if it's wrong to say, but Lana Del Rey, I missed all of, like, I literally got into her like last month. Like so her new album, like I saw that new video, Chemtrails over the country club or whatever. And I was like, what is that? I know the name. I bought that album and I love it. But my 21st century jams are Joanna Newsom, who is a indie harpist, who's married to Andy Samberg, who's on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And she's crazy. She's kind of like, I love Kate Bush, so she's got a kind of a Kate Bush vibe, but same thing, very much a storyteller. Probably takes months to write her tunes as well. That delves into the history of, and in fact, she doesn't tell her fans. So she kind of waits for the blogs to come out to see if fans have gotten the actual thing right. So I dig that. I like artists that make you work a little bit. So, and then Bach. I've been listening to tons of Bach lately. So where is the reggae in that recent history? It's there. It's always there. It just hasn't been on the turntable for a week.
That's great. Thanks.
That is awesome. Jason, thank you so much for spending this evening with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Before we let you go, where can people go to check out your music?
Well, I'm all over all the usual places like Spotify and Apple and iTunes and Deezer and Bandcamp, and it's Jason Wilson Music is generally the best way, or JasonWilsonMusic.com is our website, so you can check us out there as well.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure, Jason. Thank you again.
Thank you.